my name is Kathryn Patricia Cobbler. Usually when I compose or perform, I perform under the name Kathryn Patricia.
My name is Elizabeth, and I am a Franco-Ontarian dance artist based here in Ottawa. I work under the name Take Up Space, so that's where I create, perform, and collaborate with people, places, and art forms.
And I am a loop pedal violist, composer, and educator. So basically, a lot of my work centers around solo viola using with the loop pedal, which is a device that allows me to turn myself into a string orchestra. I find that it's an interesting medium, particularly because the viola isn't really known as being a solo instrument. A lot of people think of the violin, but I really fell in love with just kind of the colors that you find on the instrument. It's almost like the alto in a choir. It's almost that mellow sound. And so the loop pedal helps me to highlight some of those melodies and sounds that you find on the instrument.
Through the work that I do, which includes interpreting, choreographing, facilitating, and teaching, I'm trying to work with my group of collaborators in an interdisciplinary feminist way so that we can all find commonalities and find a non-hierarchical structure through which to create and collaborate together, and make both our process and the work that comes of it more accessible and inclusive.
Who DM'd first? What happened there?
I think I DM'd you, Elizabeth. Did I? Yeah, I think that was it. So I had just seen Elizabeth's work on Instagram, and I just thought, I know a little bit about the dance world, but not a lot, and I just thought it was just so creative, the work that she was doing. So I just sent her a note saying, hi, my name is Kathryn, introducing myself, and, just saying, hey, if you would ever like to work together, that's something that I would be interested in. So, yeah.
When Kathryn reached out to me, I checked out her stuff and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I hadn't heard viola on loop pedal and it was so lush, and because Kathryn creates her own original work, like it was just also so creative, and I was really inspired to work with her. So
that is very interesting, and it's very telling about the times that we live too, because I also stalk some people that I think are awesome on social media, waiting for the chance to propose a project and let's collaborate for a second and see how that goes.
Yeah, it's like it's a 2020 art love story.
It really is, yeah.
How did you decide on the project?
I wanted to create something that was not inside a vacuum. So I was like, what's going on right now? Oh, this pandemic and all of these inequities are going on right now. And we can't ignore those. They're everywhere. I mean, they're within everything that's happening inside our art, inside our lives. They're structures, organizations. So I decided, well, let's work with that addresses the different perspectives each of the collaborators have, the different experiences they're having in this moment in time. Well, dance and the performing arts in general, they're very physical art forms. They feed off of the energy of people in the room. I thought, well, that's something that ties into all of this as well. So let's work also with lack of touch, lack of connection. How can we connect through this digital medium? How can we adapt ourselves both in this process and in general? And what does that mean, and what does that look like, and what does that feel like?
Were you not improvising live? What was going on in there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the process, which was very collaborative, which I really appreciated Elizabeth's approach to that, and just the way that she was able to frame rehearsals in terms of getting us to do writing assignments and then being able to share, our experience about connection and disconnection. And that really set a framework for how we would work together, I think, for the dancers and their movement, but also that really was the heart of inspiration for the music that I was writing for it as well. And I had based it off of some previous compositions that I had done, and it was from an EP that Elizabeth was familiar with of my work, and so I thought that was fitting. So in terms of the music for the event, I would say the themes were pretty much they were through composed and went along with the movements. But live improvisation is deeply part of my practice, and so I always like to be in a position where I can respond to what things are going on in the moment. So I mean, I think that there were some things like if I saw the dancers were doing something, I would want to respond in the moment. So in terms of the composition, was it live improvisation? I think there was probably a little bit of that, but in terms of like the thematic structure, that was set out, and that was something that we had developed through our time working together.
So how was the challenge of I think for Kathryn to be that active collaborator in the once everyone is together, but also to Elizabeth to coordinate all of a total of 4 artists that are doing this thing at the same time?
There is a delay on Zoom, and that was something that we knew. But the thing that I really appreciated was that I think the dancers, they were using Zoom as part of their artistic medium. And so I think that really helped in terms of it wasn't just we're dancing and it just happens to be on Zoom, but actually Zoom became part of the artistic and the creative process. And I think for myself as well, since the pandemic had started, I was continuing to create. So then it had a setup which I felt comfortable using on Zoom. And so in terms of the clarity of the music, I think that was able to go through. So, I had got the right mics and all the things that I needed to make sure that things worked well on Zoom. So I think that was helpful. But I think ultimately Zoom just became part of the creative process because it was the thing that we had.
Yeah, I agree, Kathryn. Sort of luckily for us, this project was never envisioned to start as something in a studio or in a theater. So we were able from the get-go to, yes, like Kathryn mentioned, like have Zoom as an integral part of what we were doing and use it as like the part of the framework of choosing the material, choosing sort of in addition to choreographing the movement and for Kathryn creating and setting the score, we were thinking about framing through Zoom and like framing both in the individual squares and then as a whole picture. So there was like that additional element that was in there. We didn't have a ton of lag or delays. We were really, really lucky. Yeah, accepting things that happened in the digital reality and just saying this is part of the process and it's fine if this is part of the performance because this is the subject matter and this is we can't change what is, so let's embrace what is and we had lots of fun too. Like we were dealing with some serious things, but we also laughed a lot. We also played around, and that was a joy to be able to connect in that way.
You mentioned before early in the interview different frameworks and almost like homeworks that all of the different collaborators would work with. Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Yes, I wanted to create tasks, ways of working that would apply to all of us. So to Kathryn as musician, composer, performer, to the dancers as performer collaborators, and to myself, the choreographer who's not in the piece. Because all of us, all 5 of us participated in these exercises. One of the ways I decided to go about doing that was creating these writing exercises that I guess prompted us to reflect on certain aspects of what was going on in a personal way. and no one was required to share, but everyone was invited to share what they felt comfortable sharing. So we would talk about the exercise. I would share the questions, and then we'd all take about 15 minutes, turn off our screens. It was also a good screen break, so our eyes and our brains had a moment. We'd go do our thing, writing, reflecting, and then we'd come back, and then we'd share what we wanted to share. One of the segments was, if connection was a movement or a sound, what would that look like? What would that sound like? What would that feel like? And so connected to the writing, we also had physical manifestations, I guess, of our reflections. And because I wanted to work in a very collaborative way, those reflections that became physical ended up in the work itself. Which is why it was really important for me to make sure during the presentation that I let everyone know, like, this is not all mine. Like, this is everybody's work. We did this together, and yeah, to me in general that's important, but especially for this work, I thought let's put it out there, make sure it's very clear.
I really appreciated the writing exercises just because it's a medium that we could all relate to, and I feel like that helped us to develop themes cross disciplines. So I found it really helpful when we were able to write about something, then talk about it, and then be able to say, okay, what's the movement that you think of? And then for me, I would also think, well, what's the sound as well? And so I think those writing exercises really helped for us to kind of have common ground, for us to share our experiences, but then relate it back to our own art forms, but then also to have a through line between the art forms as well. So I really appreciated just being able to sit in the material and actually to make the project personal, you know? And I think that that was something meaningful in the presentation for me. I think in terms of that, we are all going through this process of connection and disconnection. And so as we were showcasing that through the project, we know that our audience members who are also in this pandemic are experiencing that in their own ways. And then for them to be able to sit in that with us, I think that that was really powerful.
How was the reception of the piece for you? Because after the public presentation online version of it, there was for a moment for conversation. And how was it for you?
I was really grateful and appreciative for the responses that we received, both like the expressing gratitude to be able to connect through dance and music and performance online with others. Yeah, I always want to hear from the audience. It's always such a pleasure to me. Like, no matter what, like I'm open to hearing whatever they felt or thought or saw. And the same applied here, except that it was incredibly special because performing used to be something that happened a lot. Like, you could go to a show, you could go to probably 20 shows a week if you wanted across a bunch of disciplines, and still there would be more shows. But right now, things being what they are, it's kind of a rare, special moment of connection for people to take the time out of their lives and sit down in their space. And it's kind of vulnerable in a way to share your space with other people, even if you're the one watching a show. It's a bit of a different situation. So anyway, I felt really grateful to hear what people were saying. A lot of people mentioned that for them it reflected the realities that they were facing currently, which I was really glad to hear of. A lot of people on my end who weren't familiar with Kathryn before absolutely fell in love with Kathryn's work, and that was so nice. I mean, of course they did, but like, I was happy to be able to kind of cross worlds. That's always fun. I always enjoy that.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right in terms of it was a really intimate experience, you know? Like it's when you go to a concert, it's you're not usually in your living room, you know? Like that's just not something that usually happens, but I think in some ways if we can take anything from this period of time or experiencing art during this time, knowing that art is supposed to be something that is intimate, that's something that reflects our lives, that reflects the things that we care about. And I think that if we can take that intimacy and that experience, and when, you know, whenever that is, that we can go back into formal concert settings to be able to still create that experience, I think is really valuable. So I think it was really a special time.
This idea of challenging the systems of how you run a process, or I would like to hear more from you about that, I guess specifically as well in terms of what was your role as being this outside choreographer?
I can only speak to dance because that's where I come from. There is a tradition in dance of maintaining some very rigid hierarchical structures. I mean, I would say this is going back a long time. Not everyone is working in that way anymore. But as someone who identifies as an intersectional feminist, that way of working just doesn't sit well with me, and I think it doesn't sit well with a lot of the people I like to work with. And I think just creating a space collaboratively where we can come together as we are is an open, more free way of working that lets us be present in a way that's perhaps different from a rigidly structured hierarchy. And I guess the reason why I choose to work like this is because of past experiences I've had, especially coming from the ballet world, where there's a lot of emphasis on body type, and it's a very historically isolated culture. And I want to be able to dance and I want to be able to create, and I want to do that in a way that's holistic and in a way that supports me and the other people in the room. And that's really important to me. I don't think they're mutually exclusive at all. And being an outside choreographer, part of the reason I do that is also because I have a hard time seeing what's happening when I'm in it. That's also why I'm outside the work, because I have been in my own work before and I find it super challenging to see the whole picture. Um, some people are able to do that. Maybe someday I will, but generally, I stay on the outside. I usually name at the beginning of a process that we all have different roles, but all of our roles are equally important. And I truly believe that. Like without the dancers, there would be no dancing. Without the musician composer, there would be no music. Without the choreographer, there would be no structured movement. So we all need each other to make this thing happen. And that's what's so cool about it, I think. Like, that's what's so neat about it is that all of our different strengths and unique qualities come together to create something that we couldn't create alone. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, well, and at the same time, none of them can see the outside point of view. It's like you all need each other, right? I think I asked this question because I identified a lot with it. My journey has been pretty much the same, but not in the dance world, in the regular theater world, as English likes to divide sometimes. I've always asked myself, what would be that role then of someone if you don't have a top-down clear hierarchy? What would be the role of the other person? And how at the end of the day, everyone that's in it don't have the ability to see everyone from outside and see, okay, is this project still a one project, or are we doing three pieces at the same time and we lost track of it? And also it's good to hear from you because there's some sort of kinship. I'm not sure, how do you both feel in that sense, like wanting to work that way and knowing that by practice and a bit rationally, theoretically as well. How do you feel in this environment that we live? Do you feel like, yeah, no, I'm in a trend, or it feels like I'm the only one doing this thing and no one gets me?
Well, I guess to jump off of that, I don't know. I feel like the viola as an instrument is kind of like the ugly duckling of the string family. So I often feel like the odd man out, and knowing that as my work as a violist that works with the loop pedal, there's a small group of us across North America who kind of do that as an art form. And I think that there's such an interesting thing when we look at ourselves as artists and then we look at ourselves as kind of good clinicians of our art, right? And I think both are important. But I find, Elizabeth, when you were talking about that kind of hierarchical, sorry, that's a very hard word for me to say this morning, structure, I think that that's really hard because I think in a lot of systems, and perhaps I'm less familiar with dance, but I know for sure in terms of the traditions of Western classical music that they're, especially when you have an orchestra, you have a conductor and they're the visionary, and then you have some input from between. But I mean, ultimately, your job is to play the right notes at the right time. And I think that can be something very beautiful and something very powerful about that, especially as a whole piece. But in some ways, when you think of the artist part of yourself, the side of yourself that's trained to ask questions, to be able to be aware of your surroundings and how things intersect, and wanting to be able to respond to those things in the moment, in some ways, when you have this kind of clear hierarchical structure, you kind of have to shut part of that off because you have to go into a kind of a box. Whereas when we work collaboratively, I think that there's something beautiful. We're able to bring kind of all parts of ourselves to the work that we're doing. And I think that that makes the work even more powerful, right? And so I think, yeah, kind of in that vein of just wanting to kind of bring all of ourselves, sometimes I think we don't always see those structures out there in the different disciplines, but I love projects like this where we can kind of create that and to be able to kind of, put that forward in that way of working together forward.
I didn't even know, like, coming from where I came from, like, I didn't even know I could ask questions. I didn't know I could give input. Honestly, I had no idea. And this isn't to say, like, I do value, there are people who work with very clear roles and have respect and are open and kind to other people. I don't think that having roles that are clearly defined excludes that at all. But yeah, it was like a revelation to me when I realized that, like, I have an opinion on what I do. Like, I was used to, going into the studio, I get there early, I warm myself up the minute the teacher walks in the room. And there is value in, like, having a structure. I would be, I'd be ready, I'd be in my position, and I wouldn't talk the whole time. And you can't drink water during it. Like, I had this, it's the etiquette of the way I was trained. I'm sure there were people around me questioning, but I was just like, oh my God, I gotta get everything perfect. Like, I gotta learn the way. And anyway, when I finally realized that I have an opinion and the other people around me have an opinion on what we're doing and it's not a monolith, I think that's what's important, is like, dance is not a monolith, music is not a monolith. Like, yeah, the culture that you work in is not a monolith. And like that, thinking that way, it just opened up a lot of possibilities for me. And it allows me to, yeah, to work across disciplines, to think in ways that I never would have been thinking in, like, I don't know, when I was much younger. That's not very clear, but yeah, I hope that makes
And
sense.
it's also interesting that we're technically from three different formats here, but we share that type of experience and thinking. And we all, even if we don't identify as female, we're seen as female, and our our experience, it's also shared in that sense. And I think me as an actor was pretty much the same thing. It was like, yeah, I'm here, tell me what to do. And then slowly learning of like, but I'm actually smart. You know? So I got my training and I spent the first 25 years of my life in Brazil, and then I moved to Canada and I moved to do a master's in directing. So, and it was a practical master's, so I would direct student actors right away, like day one, let's do that. And that was the first conflict, or the first thing for me to understand. It was that they were really expecting me to tell them exactly what to do at any given time. And then I was, but we can improvise for 2 days at least. And they were like, but what do you mean? It's like, no, we have time to improvise, and then I can structure it, and then we'll get there.
I have this one example, just speaking about improvisation, but when I finally clicked, when this clicked for me, I thought it was so funny. So the ballet training, I started dance fairly late, professionally training, I should say, at about like 16. So I went to a ballet school, and then I came back to Ottawa and I trained some more in ballet, and then I started training seriously in kind of contemporary dance. And when I started training seriously in contemporary dance, we had improvisation classes. And I was so stuck, kind of like your students. I was like, but what am I doing? I don't know what to do. And then I love to improvise. Like, it's one of my favorite things. I spend a lot of time improvising by myself, and I also include it often in the work that I do with others. And after that experience, about, I think last year, it clicked on me that, like, when I was a little kid, we had a lot of music in my house. That's part of why I love dance. Is I love the rhythm of the movement, and I love connecting my body to music. So when I was younger, I used to dance around the house all the time to the radio or to whatever CD we were listening to. We went to like a lot of live concerts, and I just didn't know that that was improv. I didn't know that that's what they meant. Like, that was improv, and I've been doing it forever. But when we put this label on it in the studio, I froze, and I was like, I don't know what this is. Which is like hilarious. I don't know how I didn't make the connection, but so funny.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting thing because I think when you are training in a specific art form, you're learning the fundamentals of it and you're really trying to get those things right, And I think that, when you're learning something, the thing you're like, okay, I want to do this with the most precision I can. And I think that when you look at improvisation, that kind of rubs up against that a little bit, you know what I mean? Because if there isn't something or someone telling you what to do, then it's almost like, well, how do I know what to align my precision with? And I think eventually it's like almost like you find your own sort of precision in it. And when I think of improvisation, I think of, well, myself as a composer, composing is just making decisions with sound. And so improvisation is just making decisions with sound live and in the moment. And so I think when I teach, I tell my students that. But I think that it can be a hard thing if you've never allowed yourself to do that. But I think, as you said, that example, Elizabeth, I think as kids, a lot of times we do that so kind of spontaneously and just kind of it's innate for us. But sometimes when we get deep into our training, because we're so focused on the perfection of it, that almost has to take a back seat a little bit, And so, yeah, when you re-engage, it can be hard sometimes.
Yeah, and it's the whole, that's a great point. It's also the whole question about when do you do each thing, I guess, right? Like, well, this project, this is what is demanded. This project, this is what is demanded, and how you're able to navigate. What is your dream next for this project, for Dream in True North? What you dream, so not necessarily what you have lined up, If you do, that's great. Let us know. But especially what your hopes and dreams are for it. What are you looking for next? So we can see how we can support and what we can expect as well.
Well, we actually, it's very, very, very new. But we just received support from Ottawa Dance Directive for a second phase of creation. So a residency with them, which is going to take place, yay, this fall, winter 2020. So that's like the dates aren't even set, but we're doing that. It's going to happen. It's very exciting. It's going to be in person but distanced and with masks and safety protocols in place. And yeah, I don't know what's going to happen in that residency. We're going to find out. And yeah, the dream for Dream in True North is to keep working together, to keep exploring the worlds that we started creating, and keep reflecting the realities in this realm within the realm of the work. I mean, it would be lovely at some point to present what we discover additionally in phase two, paired with phase one from tactics, to share that with people at some point. That is the next dream for Dream in True North. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it going forward. It'll be nice to be able to see people in person. I think that that's something I'm excited about. And just to continue the collaboration, I think as a musician, I love whether it be, I don't know, what were the three words that you were, interdisciplinary, I love them all. So it's been a joy just to work with Lola and Sarah and Melissa and Elizabeth. It's been really great getting to know them and working with them. So I'm excited as the project goes forward, and I echo Elizabeth in terms of it would be great to be able to present both phase one and also phase two together. So
Great. Well, it was very nice to get to know more about both of you and your project and share our experiences, which wasn't planned, but it's kind of a great thing. We're probably around the same age, so I think it makes sense that we're sharing our perceptions in very similar ways in this performance industry. How do you both see the future of performing arts in that sense? You know, do you have an idea of like, oh, I think the future is interdisciplinary period, or it's not, or it's something else? So how do you see the future of performing arts working and collaboration?
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of my perception now is kind of formed by the season that we're in terms of the pandemic. When I think of my colleagues who play in larger ensembles or in orchestras, even though those works are really powerful, it's gonna be a long time before we can actually really all get in the room in the same way like we used to. And so I think going forward, I think that we are headed into a more chamber season, if you will, a season of smaller ensembles, which I think is beautiful because I think those, whether it be in dance or music or a mix of, all of those things and all the art forms, I think that in smaller ensembles, it's a space where you can have more input from the members involved, right? And so I think that there is going to be kind of more of a collaborative feel to things. And I think that that could change the type of works that people create. I feel like it might bring more intimacy to our field. I think that there is something beautiful about going to large concerts. I think sometimes there are things that are like larger than life when you go to those events, but at the same time, I think that there's a beauty of being able to have, 5 to 10 people on a stage creating art and then a smaller audience because I feel like then you're really in it together. So I think more intimacy and more kind of a chamber field within the field of the arts as we go forward.
I think I can speak for many independent artists in that it was already necessary to work on a small scale with funding and scheduling and space availability. Um, I I and many other people I know were already working with small groups. Um, and yeah, the intimacy that you can mm, foster, I guess, in those smaller spaces is important. And I think it's doubly important right now, as Kathryn said. Um, I'm not sure how I envision the future, only that I know that if we're tapping into ourselves and the uniqueness of our expressions as artists, whatever is true for each person and whatever is true for each person, if they can share that and work with that, I think that's a way to adapt. I think that tapping into, yeah, our uniqueness and what we each need and what our community needs, if we can tap into that, that is the best way to adapt. And really listening to each other and listening to the self is always important. And I think it's going to be still, it's going to be even more important going forward, listening to the needs of your world and your community and yourself, and like, and reflecting that through your art. And that will include how you present and what you present and where you present. Yeah. So what's kind of neat is we don't really totally know what it's going to look like because it depends on what the artists are dreaming and what the communities are feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I am very grateful Tactics was able to support you both and your other collaborators and your project. This is important to not only support the project, but also the people that are doing it, right? And yes, I am very happy that you already have a phase 2, and I'm very excited to see that as well. So keep us all on the loop of however that goes. And let us know if you need anything else as well.
Sure. So the other collaborators that we worked with are dancers Sarah Hopkin, Lois Chan, and Miri Savoie. And they're also from the Ottawa Gatineau region.
Bye.
Thank you to Tactics also. Thank you. We're so glad you supported
Yes.
the project.
Thank you so much.